Of course, capturing the lizards is important, but studying their physiology and comparing it to other colonies is something researchers are hoping to zone in on.
So we've got our lab here at Ohio Wesleyan University. We've got a great group of students working in the lab, catching the animals in the field and collecting data in the field, and then maintaining the animals in the lab, taking care of them, and then conducting some experiments and measures on them here in captivity.
So we feed them mealworms and we give them water. We fill the water dish up with the water, and then we just spray the sides of the cages so they can drink the water off the sides, and also so it's like a humid type of environment, because reptiles, they need that humidity for their skin.
I would say the process actually starts as soon as we catch a lizard. So as soon as we catch a lizard, we initially take its body temperature, we collect a blood sample, and then give it a quick number.
What we're doing there is we're looking at the entire DNA sequence of individuals from Columbus and Cincinnati and also Italy, and we're comparing them to see if there's any evidence that the populations have experienced natural selection on certain traits, the population genetics at a broader level to understand if these populations are inbred, and how this colonization of this new habitat is affecting the genetic diversity within the population. Most of the time when organisms experience a genetic bottleneck, it's a really bad thing because they lose genetic diversity. They don't have any genetic diversity to respond to new environments. But in these lizards, apparently it didn't slow them down at all. And we're trying to understand why that might be or what that process was like.
As weather patterns changed, students began to lose their luck finding the lizards.
There's a level of habituation that I think could still be occurring with the tiles. There's been a dramatic change in the place they lived in a very small time frame. So although the bushes and the cover that they had previously, the cracks in the brick wall have been taken away. And now they have these new objects laying there that they could use, but is it safe? Is it something that they want to use just yet? Has it met their standards as a hiding place? And that's something that might take a little bit of time for them to use. And so I think we're still in that sort of realizing what the lizards are going to do and how they're going to behave process.
They don't really come out in the cold. They can't survive in the cold. So they mostly stay underground. That's why we have the tiles layered in a kind of way so that they have a way to go into them but still get heat and radiated throughout their bodies.
And we learned that the bigger tiles will hold heat better, they capture heat better, and we've been finding them only underneath the bigger black tiles that I put out there.
But as temperatures rose, lizards reappeared, this time appearing across the street.
At first I was like, we ain't catch no lizards, because most of the time, until the last time we went, we didn't catch none. But all the other classes was, so I was like, there's no luck, no chance of us catching lizards. But then we caught some. I was like, okay, we'll keep the hope alive, so I'm sure it's going to be more here in the summer.
We did catch 2 lizards, a male and a female. I caught one and a student caught one. So that was exciting for us because we've been going out a couple days a week. There is a big worry that because the bushes were removed so early and they're so dependent on a very specific habitat, that once those bushes were gone, they have moved into the neighbors. In fact, we've seen them in the neighbors' block.
In the removal process of all those bushes, the hope, at least, is that only a few were displaced. And so they moved across and were in the bushes. I believe it's a multi-purpose building. That's a #1 priority on our list, is to keep these lizards contained to the school parking lot and remove them from there to the Ohio Wesleyan campus.
Unfortunately, today it was a little discouraging that we found some in the vegetation by the apartment building, because that means they're not just limited to this parking lot, they're on the next block over. That vegetation is pretty dense. I imagine the folks in that office or apartment building aren't going to be too thrilled with the proposition of removing that vegetation. So that could present a real challenge to trying to remove these guys. But we'll just keep at it and get as many as we can. I have one animal back in the lab that actually laid eggs last week. So a little bit early compared to the animals out in the wild, because they've been in the lab where it's been warmer and more consistent. Hasn't exactly been nicest spring here in Ohio, which actually gives us a little more time. That'll push back the egg laying date and everything like that. So. But overall, we've had great success. A student, Ethan, has been catching them by hand very impressively. Greg caught a couple by hand. I was able to get a couple with the lasso. We're happy that we've gotten as many as we have, and we'll bring these guys back to the lab, and we're trying to get as much information about the animals as we can. Hassan, you can give that to Alyssa, please. Thank you for being the blood holder. Now when someone asks you like what you did in school today, you're like, oh, I held lizard blood. You can never be entirely sure that you've got, you've eliminated all the animals. There's no way to prove that something isn't in a place. But if we keep doing that, then we can be pretty assured that we've removed the animals that are here, or if there are a few left, then hopefully that number is small enough where they can't continue reproducing and build the population back up. So it just takes a lot of time and effort to come out and keep catching them, and then repeated surveys even after we think we've got them all to make sure that there's no more popping up.
Even if we don't catch every single animal across the street, there really doesn't appear to be many places for them to overwinter there, so that's another thing. Like a couple of loose animals over there may not mean an established population. We'll see.
With the wall lizards, I don't know if we can ever say mission completely accomplished, that we've eradicated them for sure, but at least right now it looks like I surprised even my own expectations in how well it went. And I think a couple factors led to that. I think getting out here early in the year, removing the vegetation really early in the year, and then really removing the animals early in the year before they reproduce, and also having a lot of eyes on the ground. So it's been fantastic to work with the high school students, and they've been conducting surveys regularly when we can't get down here and do that. So that it's been a real kind of cool collaborative team effort. So I'm thrilled with the way it's gone, although I still don't feel like we can 100% say that we got them all. I think if we come out a couple more times when the weather is really optimal for lizards and we don't see anything moving with another 2 or 3 surveys, then I'd feel pretty good about thinking that we got them. I think what we learned here we can translate to other sites and hopefully keep them from spreading too far, and hopefully continue this kind of cool education and outreach and data collection along the way.
Now, the effort to contain these lizards will continue into the near future with the continued hope of removing this colony.
Reading Rainbows, LeVar Burton came to Columbus to share a few inspirational words to Columbus City School teachers as they get ready for summer experience.
So teachers are really important, and they're important to me.
The actor and literacy advocate spent time speaking with teachers about their commitment and dedication to education and learning.
What you do is critically important. You know that. I know that. The kids certainly experience that. Never for a moment feel or think that you're not valued. Everybody may not show you how much you're valued, but you are and always will be.
Roxanne Beard, a 6th grade math teacher at Yorktown Middle School, will be spending her summer teaching at Sherwood Middle School. She says this is the first time the district has held a kickoff summer experience professional development event, and it did not disappoint.
I think this was very empowering for our teachers and then our staff that's working together. We don't know each other, so this is a chance that we get to collaborate and start building those relationships as well, and talking about ideas that we want to see happen in the summer experience program this year.
Really, we have been really intentional about creating a professional learning experience that has teachers at our center.
This year's summer experience includes project-based learning focusing on entrepreneurship, family and consumer sciences, fine arts, STEM, and world languages and cultures.
And the reason why summer experiences are so critical is it provides the same content and cross-curricular learning process that happens during the school year. Students who, for instance, are participating in our STEM path with Franklin Park Conservatory, they not only get the science, social studies, reading, math, right? All of that content, but they're able to actually use it in a very real world experience type of fashion.
Summer experience starts June 20th and will take place over the course of 4 to 6 weeks.
We are grateful that Junior Achievement leaned in to support us in getting LeVar Burton here to support our staff.
As a school district, it is mission critical for us to leverage the power of partnerships. Today, we have over 150 community partners that have joined hands with us to make sure that we are providing access to our families.
An opportunity to have a leg up and get those kids ready for school so that the first day they've got their bus pass, they've got their school supplies, and they got their backpack and they're ready to go. This fair means the world to all of us.
It really brings our community together. It really helps our families feel welcome and excited to come back to school. And this is the momentum we need to carry out through the rest of the year.
This event is actually amazing. There are so many different partners here. Every healthcare entity that we have is here, and we're all working together to be able to put everybody in one place on a beautiful day like this and just be able to identify and help everyone that walks through these lines.
To be able to reach 10,000, 13,000 people in one day is more than what we can do throughout the entire year throughout outreach. The diversity of the folks that are here, the amount of interest that people have in the Red Cross and all of our community partners is really encouraging and inspiring.
There is strength in partnerships, and we want Columbus City Schools to know that we are a partner both in the classroom and outside of the classroom. We share a common goal, and that goal is student success. And we want these students to succeed, and we would love to be a part of their success as they go throughout this school year and school years to come.
Just makes me so proud to be a Columbus City School graduate, proud of all the great teachers and staff of Columbus City Schools that are out here making it happen, and just really proud of all the partners that are here, from after-school programs, all the city teams that are here, really all kind of stacking hands, and I think showing the kids and families of this community that we're all in this together, and we're going to do everything in our power to make sure we have an awesome, awesome school year.
Family support is critical at CCS, and we have a wealth of resources for our families.
The mission of the Columbus Recreation and Parks Department is to connect the residents of this community through nature, wellness, and creativity. It's all about being able to reach the students as they are out in the community as well as in the classroom.
The growth of this city is going to be incredible, but we're not just interested in being bigger, we're interested in being better. And that's what today is all about, to make sure our kids and our families are successful. I think this is going to be the best school year ever.
It is our goal and a priority for us to support the whole child, which includes the whole school and the whole community. So we really want to provide those wraparound supports to our students and families and provide them with the resources that they need so that their students can come to school every day ready to learn and ready to succeed.
Good morning, everyone, to the Nsdp February 22nd. I'd like to call meeting to order. We do not have a quorum today, so we will not be approving the minutes from the last meeting. And so I think with that, we're just going to move right into the action items.
Perfect. Good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday. I've got my team on the Zoom virtual side of things again today, so we'll jump right into action item 4.01, which is award of a general contract for our Mifflin High School renovations. And I'll note that this is what we're calling Phase 2. So we entered into this contract knowing that we would need to come back and issue a Phase 2 when we had a little more clarity and information on some of those final items we wanted to incorporate. And so with that, I will turn it over to Ansley.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Go ahead and get my screen shared. Okay. As Alex said, this is really echoey. Can you guys hear that echo, or is that just me? That's better. Okay, this is 4.01, award of general contract for Mifflin High School renovations, Phase 2. So I wanted to start off with the Phase 1 legislation. So as you can see here, that was for a little over $11.5 million. And during our Phase 1 Nsdp meeting, we especially pulled out this part of the legislation. When we did Phase 1, we initially assumed we would be at around 13.5 for the overall renovation. As you'll see when we get into the presentation, we are well over that 13.5 by about $1.5 million. So I wanted to bring that to your attention. We are over our original estimate. We also assumed we would be bringing this to you last month. But as you'll see as we go through the presentation, we've added a lot of large scope areas to Phase 2 of the project that we did not initially believe we would be adding. A lot of reasons for that. First, this is our first high school that we're attempting to do a renovation like this at. You obviously remember Hamilton STEM for last year. Small elementary building, doesn't have the bigger spaces that a high school has, not as complex, mostly just classroom renovation. At a high school, we have a full service kitchen, a whole athletics area, the auditorium, performing arts area. So it's been a little bit of work to get through those spaces and understand the cost of those spaces with our contractor. As we went through, we also are intentionally trying to make this as comprehensive of a renovation as we can. With our funding in the past, we've kind of come back to buildings year over year over year, which is really hard on the building staff. It's hard on our custodial staff in the summers. It's hard on the building leadership because there's always an interruption. So in looking at these renovations with our PI levy in place, we thought it's best to include all that we can, all that we think we would do in the next 5 years while we're at the building right now, to limit the disruption to the building. So I'm going to go through a couple of those scope areas just so you can see kind of the highlights of what we added with Phase 2. I did want to point out a positive. Thanks to our early approval of Phase 1 back in November, we've been able to take advantage of so many school breaks, long weekends, to get ahead of some of the work. So we're not stuck in that 10-week summer window, which is just impossible to get a project of this size completed. So at this point, we've already completed the ceiling and lighting replacements in 14 classrooms. We've painted 6 of those classrooms, and we have another 4 prepped to paint this weekend. So again, thank you guys for doing the phased approach with us. It has really helped the success of this project, and it's going to make the summer a success for us this year. So I'll go through the proposal. And the first couple areas I wanted to point out are shown here. So I'm going to talk through the locker rooms first. The locker rooms were not at all included in phase one, and we didn't intend on including them in phase two. As we did our additional engagement with staff members, with coaches, with students, we realized those spaces were a barrier for students in their interest in participating in athletics. Obviously, athletics is a huge focus for us with moving forward with our PI levy. So we decided, let's look at these spaces. Let's see how we can renovate them to be attractive to students, to coaches, to help booster that athletics program at Mifflin. So it'll be a complete renovation of actually both floors. There's 2 floors of locker rooms here. We'll be creating a men's locker room and a women's locker room on the first floor, right off the gym, and then a flexible space upstairs that could be used as their wrestling room, an away locker room, kind of whatever they need based on the season. The other space I'll point out here on this sheet is the Construction Technology Lab. CTE is another huge focus for the district. We initially did not intend to do a large renovation in this classroom other than what we were doing everywhere else, so painting, flooring, furniture. As we're talking to the CTE team, we realized this space, although construction has been operating in this space for several years at this point, this space really isn't equipped with some of those amenities that we should really have in a construction technology lab, such as permanent dust collection, overhead power, some additional power on the walls so that they can get new equipment and easily start using that equipment. So again, thinking, well, we don't want to come back in 2 years and add these things. Let's do it right now. So at the end of the summer, this space will be completely outfitted for construction technology with that permanent dust collection system, some additional power. The last space on this sheet that I'll talk you through is the kitchen. Again, we did not intend to touch the kitchen in phase one, but as we're talking to building leadership, it was made apparent that there is only 1 serving line at Mifflin. That's very not standard for us. There's usually 2 serving lines. What that was causing was an incredible backup in the queue at lunchtime. So students were receiving their food with almost no time to actually eat it, which, I mean, that's a terrible impact on a student's day, a student's experience at our school. So we looked at it, is it possible to add 2 lines? So we brought on a kitchen designer, and it is possible to add 2 lines with some renovation work to that kitchen area. So the renovation is pretty isolated to that front line area. We had to do some wall work, add some doors to get the queue to work. But again, that was kind of a large scope item that we did not anticipate that increased the budget, but will have an immense impact on the student experience and a student's day. The last space is an area that's right behind the band room. Building leadership had identified this as a very underutilized space in the building, but they couldn't really use it because of the sound transfer from the band room into this space. It's a large space, so it kind of felt like a waste to say, oh, well, it's too loud, we won't do anything with it. So what we did is add sound attenuation to acoustically separate this back of house space from the band room. What that allowed us to do was reprogram the space as a student support office. When Mifflin was built, it wasn't built with the amount of offices we would build today. So services like guidance counselors, graduation coaches, matriculation coaches are kind of spread throughout the building. The goal from the building leadership was to bring all those folks together, kind of a one-stop shop for students all together in one space in the building. With the sound attenuation, we were able to reprogram this space as that. So it'll be a real destination for students to come to get those services. So those are the main highlights of what we added with phase 2. This is just the narrative that goes through those changes in the scope. I'm not going to read through all these because I highlighted them for you. So here we go to the legislation. So overall, for all of those phase 2 upgrades, we're at a little over 3.5 million, which will bring our comprehensive renovation to a little over 15 million. Again, this kind of highlights what we already talked about, the big adds to that phase 2, as well as what we did in the phase 1 renovation. LEDE form has not changed. We're still at 20%, and still planning to use the same vendors: Farber, Gantz, King Business, JR Roofing, and Undefined Heights. And Gantz has been great. They've been doing all of the painting work and a little bit of the general trades work so far that we've done during the school year. So just a shout out to that awesome LED vendor that's supporting us on this project. That is all I have. Unless Alex has anything to add, I'll open it up for questions.
Yeah, I'll give just a tad more context. So remember that we launched this project, I think roughly late spring, early summer of 2023. So this was prior to, so we were certainly talking about the permanent improvement levy, but certainly before it passed. So at that point, we were working with a fixed budget of $40 million to plan all of our work. And I think Ansley said it, but when we launched the project, we were very much thinking about classroom experiences. Knowing that we only had so much money to work with, really focusing on those educational environments, but not necessarily thinking about all those specialty spaces and certainly the kind of support side of things like the kitchen area. So I would say two big shifts. So number one, we're learning. I'm not gonna sit here and say that we couldn't have thought differently or planned differently, but certainly we've not been in this space before. I think we're pretty adept at new construction, but this new, like renovation of an existing space is pretty new to us. And the building itself can only tell you so much. Like you really do have to interact with the people who are managing the building, interact with the students who are in it every day to get the feedback, to really kind of tease out the fine details that you don't get by walking through the building when it's empty. And so I do kind of want to applaud Ansley. She spent a tremendous amount of time with the staff, the students, to really get that feedback. And I think the one thing I would also reiterate, especially for our board, is so it's not a change order. It's technically a phase amendment to the contract. We knew we were going to come back and amend this contract to incorporate that additional scope of work. It's not that we have to do this work. We want to do the work. We know it's meaningful to students and staff. We do believe it will impact outcomes. And thankfully, with the passage of the permanent improvement levy, we do now have those funds in place to be able to make those improvements. And I think I've maybe said it in a prior meeting, and Ansley kind of alluded to it here too. One of the mindsets we really have to shift is to quit being so reactionary. It is hard to be forward-thinking and plan without taking sufficient time to kind of think through all those details and try to anticipate what's coming at us. And so I think the phase 2 here that you see does really reflect that kind of work. And certainly as we think about our projects for summer of 2025, we'll be more mindful of those things so that hopefully there aren't quite so many unanticipated.
This project was reviewed by the technical review committee and supported back to this group. I will note too, it's important as we continue to kind of look at these projects, finding new space to reutilize an existing building really saves us money in the future, and it justifies more of the original expenditure as well when you can use those spaces. So that's great effort. With that, I would move to recommend to the board project number 24012.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. No, same sign. So recommended to the board, and we'll move on to 4.02.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Ansley. So that will bring us to 4.02. And Lori Seeger will present this one. This is award of a general contract for fire alarm replacements at multiple sites to the Brewer Garrett Company.
I'm sorry. We've been trying to get this project underway for
over a year at this point. Um, these are fire alarms in 3 of our newer renovated buildings that we did as under the FMP, so they are about 20 years old maybe, but their fire alarm systems, the panels were failing and the code has changed. So we put put the project out to bid in January of last year. We had one bid, one successful bidder, and they could not complete it in the time frame. This project has to be done over the summer when we can take the building down completely because we don't want to run exposed conduit in a relatively new building. We'd like to keep them looking new, and we're going to reuse the existing pathway that's all hidden behind the walls and above the ceiling. So this has to be done over the summer. It has to be finished but at the end of summer so we can reopen for school. We put it out for bid. It took bids in February of last year. We took bids last fall. The second time we didn't get any bids. So we put them out to cooperatives. We gave it to one cooperative. They looked at it for several months and came back with a number that was very high compared to estimate. We put it back out again through Equalis and Gordian to Brewer Garrett, and they came back with the number that was very competitive, was more in line with our expectations. Because this was originally a design bid build project, we have a full service engineering consultant on board. So this is going to be run as a hybrid. We've got the backup of our engineer. He's analyzed the bids. The technical oversight team will notice that there's a slight difference in price from what we talked about last week because we did notice some discrepancies. We got that corrected and got more accurate numbers for the board today. So we are doing renovations at Avondale, Clinton, and Fort Hayes Building 62, which is more commonly known as the Shot Tower. This is our engineer's analysis of the costing. As you can see, what our originally published estimates were, what they proposed last week, and how that varied from the estimates. What they are currently proposing, which is a total of $798,776.10, and how that varies from the original estimate. So here is our legislation in the amount of $798,000, $776.10. Here is IMEG's recommendation of award. Like I said, since we have a full service engineer, this is being run more like a conventional design bid build project. Here is their LED participation, which they are anticipating to be 20% or slightly over with Terry's approval. And do you have any questions for me?
Yeah, this was reviewed by the Technical Review Committee and approved. It was good to see numbers. You never want to wait on fire alarms for a good bid, but we're happy we got the numbers back down. So with that, I would move to recommend the award of project number 23010.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed, same sign. We're good to support the recommendation to the board. And then finally, to 4.03.
Thank you very much. Before we move on, I do just want to recap 4.02, particularly for the ability for anybody to come back and listen to this. We had a pretty lengthy discussion 2 board meetings ago about procurement and construction. And I explained for our board, there are essentially 4 tools that we have at our disposal, our procurement tool belt, if you will, for how we procure construction. There is the very traditional design bid build. There is design build. There's construction manager at risk, and there's cooperative purchasing. Admittedly, this fire alarm project is very unconventional even by our standards. I think this may be the first time we've actually gone into a project intending to use design bid build and have actually finished using cooperative purchasing. But I think Lori kind of laid out the case for the why. So historically, we've had very good success with bidding our fire alarm projects. We've had no reason to think that these projects wouldn't fit neatly into that procurement process as well. But we've put it out for bids twice. The first time, the bidder essentially, while they were under our estimate, they were non-responsive because they said they could not complete it by the schedule, which Lori explained is really important in terms of getting these buildings operational. Second time around, there were no bids. We do actually have a different package of fire alarm bids out right now, totally separate. So we're testing the market essentially to figure out whether anything has changed in the marketplace and whether we'll continue to see new bids for fire alarm projects. But Jim, to your point, like fire alarms can't wait. We can only defer them so long. They're computerized systems. So as the parts age and they begin to fail, it becomes very difficult to source parts. And so that is why the recommendation to move forward with this cooperative contract. It frankly is within our budget. They're going to meet our LEDE goal, and we will get work in that very traditional sense where we have a full engineer to oversee construction. And so we really do think it's a good solution given the circumstances.
You know, and it's important to note too, the cooperative purchasing agencies are bidding the work. I mean, the numbers they get are based on, you know, competitive environment where it's not just they're picking a number. So
yeah, you're
part of it.
You're absolutely right. And Lori touched on it, but I'll reiterate it as well. So there was a number that came in. We turned it around pretty quickly for technical oversight last week. And having that engineer on staff or under contract really did help because as they looked through the contract, they found a few things. So we get a very detailed line item quote that literally responds back to the scope drawings that we issued. And they found a few discrepancies, so the vendor added them in. They added a little bit of cost, but again, we're still within our budget. So I think it just kind of bears out, like the process really does work well. It can work well for us. All right, so that takes us to 4.03, and Dan Klein will be making this presentation. This is award of a general contract for loose furnishings at multiple sites with Friends Service Company doing business as Friends Office.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, so this is for a replacement of cafeteria furniture at the high schools in the district. I believe there are 16 sites in total. So we will begin with a copy of our advertisement. So we put out an ad both on our website and in the dispatch. The ad ran January 11th and 18th of this year. There was a general description of the project with noting a budget of $3 million in total. This budget was arrived at basically just going off of last year's numbers and adjusting for difference in volume as well as inflation. It was also noted that this would not be a prevailing wage project. So here is a copy of our pre-bid meeting agenda. The meeting was held January 19th. You can see who was in attendance from our team here. So electronic bids were due Thursday, February 8th at 9 a.m. The information was given on how to access the bid as well as log into public purchase and all that. All bids needed to be submitted through public purchase, and any pre-bid RFI questions were to be submitted in written form via email to myself. All RFIs would only be answered through project addenda, and the deadline for questions was Thursday, February 1st at 9 a.m. And again, the RFIs would only be answered in addenda. You can see our pre-bid meeting sign-in sheet here. We had quite a few attendees. And when the bids came in, we ended up receiving 5, 4 of which were very close to one another. The winning or the lowest bid being Friends Office, you can see here at about 1.65 million. So we needed to submit a substantially low letter to the bonding company, which you can see here as we were just barely over half of the estimate. And moving on to legislation. So as you can see, the dollar amount here is $1.648 million. This would be funded out of the Permanent Improvement Fund. And a copy of the contract. This will list all the different buildings here. Again, I believe there were 16. It's basically all of the high schools minus, I think, 2 or 3 that recently had renovations. So those were left out of the project. And finally, we have our LEDE Form A here, which it looks like has been signed by Terry Wise as well as Friends Office. I believe Friends Office's LEDE participation will be 54% for this project. Any questions?
So I'll give a little bit of context too on this one. So this is an initiative that we actually kicked off for last summer of 2023, where we did some focus on our middle schools. And so those 2 projects that we launched were cafeteria furnishings and then media center upgrades. I don't know if a surprise is the right word. I felt like we took a little bit of a risk in terms of the furnishings we put into those spaces. So if you're used to our cafeterias having those very traditional bench style seats pretty much everywhere, we really wanted to provide some differentiation for our students. And so if you've been able to get into any of those middle schools, you'll see that now it's a mixture. It's probably still roughly 50%, maybe even 2/3 of that very commodity seating. So it's convenient for our custodial team to move them, get floors cleaned up and taken care of, all the things you have to do to run a cafeteria. But it also includes a lot of specialty seating. So there are booth seats, there are 2-top tables, there are 4-tops, 6-top, 8-top tables. There are tables very much designed for gathering and small conversation, medium-sized group work. I think it's meaningful for us because in our school buildings, it's one of the few spaces where you can gather outside of a classroom. Like it already has fixed furniture that you can use for tutoring, for after-school events, for small group learning. And so we were a little surprised at how much positive feedback we received so quickly from those buildings. It's what we were hoping for. We just weren't quite sure if that's what we would get or not. And so, kind of working off that influence, we are also getting some requests for new furniture for high schools because, number one, they were seeing the work in the middle schools, and frankly, the furniture is in pretty poor condition. So we went ahead and launched this initiative to get all of our high schools done as well. So assuming this work is approved by the board, by this fall, we'll have substantially taken care of all the cafeteria furnishings in all of the middle schools and high schools. As Dan alluded to, we did omit a couple buildings, either because they had relatively new furniture already, or there's one building that has kind of a very specialty purpose that we said this is probably not a good fit for it. And so, yeah, we're thrilled with the response. I would say this is exactly what you want to see when you bid projects. So while we're well under the estimate, you'll see those 4 low bids are all pretty close together, which is really a good indicator that we were successful in terms of the results of the bid. And so we're really looking forward to getting this work done as well.
Good. Again, reviewed by the Technical Review Committee and recommended. So with that, I would make a motion to award the general contract on project number 24, or to recommend the approval of project number 24021.
I'll second.
All in favor is aye.
Aye.
And opposed, same sign. So we are good to go with the support.
Thank you so much.
Yep. Any comments today for from Columbus School Board or Superintendent's Office?
Don't know that we have anybody here today, but we do have one other brief presentation we'd like to make today as well, if you'll entertain us. And I think Brandy has it up and ready to go. So we also did want to take a few moments to give some feedback on our LEDE program across multiple fiscal years just to give a good perspective of where we stand within the capital improvements group. So on the screen, you see our last 6 fiscal years of performance. So for each of those kind of colored boxes, you'll see at the top, that is our total spend. And I will point out, so one thing to keep in mind here, so it was only until about 7 years ago when we started Operation Fix-It that we started tallying our results this way. It is a little challenging to tally LEDE participation on capital projects because we don't really follow a fiscal year, and yet the rest of the district does. And so we just decided that on a go-forward basis, we will track our LEDE spend rather than doing it by project, which is the simpler way to do it. We'll do it by fiscal year. So to do it by fiscal year, we're tracking payments. So payments are always going to be a lagging indicator for us. Like contracts would be the leading indicator, but the payments are going to be a lagging indicator. And so you're going to see that our spend will look a little strange sometimes because payments do lag so far behind the actual construction contracts. So, but for each of these, you'll see the total spend in that first line. Below it, you'll see our LEDE prime spend. Under that is the LEDE subcontracting for each year. And then we tally the total LEDE spend and then percentage. So you'll see for each of those 6 years reported, starting with FY18, we were at 26%. In 19, we were just below 21%. For FY20, we were at 38%. 21, we were at just below 23%. For 22, we were over 25%. And we were really pretty astounded when we tallied it for last year. We looked at this number over and over and over again because I was like, there has to be a mistake. And yet we're confident in this number. We hit just below 42, or just above 42.5%, which I think is by far the best year we've ever had as a department. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you we can continue to hold that number, but I think the performance kind of gives you a good indicator of how our capital work is really responding to the board's LEDE goal. Brandy, if you'll go ahead and flip to the next slide. Just to drill down a little bit into the results for FY23. So number one, because we do this by fiscal year, like I don't have anything to report for FY24. Our fiscal year will end on June 30th, and so we'll work on tallying the number as we get into the summer and the fall. So for FY23, our total spend, you see there was just over $43.6 million, and that represents all capital projects across all funding sources. And so the vast majority of that traditionally has been what we call our permanent improvement fund. So there's the recent permanent improvement levy that just passed, but that is just one, and it is now our primary source, but that's just one of the sources of funds that goes into that permanent improvement fund. What you also see here is the impact of ESSER spending, and I'll get into some slides a little bit later that kind of show you how our spending has waxed and waned, and then some of the opportunity that we have going forward. I also want to point out, so a question that came up from our board at their 2 meetings ago was asking on how we're tracking in terms of our LEDE spend for this fiscal year. And for our team anyways, it's incredibly challenging to pull that information together for a couple reasons that I want to highlight. So as I mentioned, so we're doing this by fiscal year, and there is a real lag in when payments come through. So even though I know I have contracts and I know they've stated they're going to meet their goal, timing of payments is very critical in terms of how that number is going to look. And then one of the other challenges is that we can very quickly see what our LEDE prime spend looks like because those contracts are tagged that way in our enterprise resource planning system, UNIS. So we can pull that information out relatively easily. What we can't see is the subcontractor spending. Subcontractor spend is all brought in. We do it electronically, but it's done through a paper process. So there is no automatic way to tie those subcontractor payments to our prime payments. Like that is a very tedious manual process that frankly Brandy does for us each year with a little bit of input from me. And again, we don't start that work until after we've cleared a fiscal year because we won't even have all of our payments tallied until that point. And And then even after we close the fiscal year, again, it's a very tedious manual process because there is no automation to it. So it's literally somebody pulling subcontractor spend out of each of the paper invoices that comes in to be able to pull this information together. So just wanted to highlight that. And then Brandy, if you'll flip to the next slide. So this is just a graph to kind of show you the same sort of information. So the 6 blocks on the left side are the exact same ones you just saw. And it really kind of demonstrates for you how our spending has increased and decreased over the various fiscal years. And so I'll kind of point you to the green, blue, purple, and yellow bars at the bottom, but I'll actually speak to them when we get to the next slide. But you can see that, so for FY18, that was really only our second full year of Operation Fix-It, and you can see how quickly our spending was ramping up as we were kind of putting the system together to spend on projects. And so then we really kind of made a big jump in FY19. We eased back down a little bit in 2020. And then in 21, you see we make that first enormous jump for us where we came close to $60 million in spend. And again, I'll get into some more detail on that on the next slide, Brandy, if you'll advance. So basically same graph here, just a little bit larger so you can focus on a couple of those items that I wanted to point out. So if you look at that first green bar, that is just our $125 million Operation Fix-It bond issue. So we committed to spending that those funds over 5 years. So we dropped off FY17 so that we're only showing 6 years here, but you can kind of see how that 5-year span of spending was relatively flat across the years once we got through the first 2 fiscal years. What you really see the influence of in FY21 is that facility task force. So you might remember that our board authorized some adjustments that resulted in Dominion Middle School moving to the former Arcadia building. It authorized the renovations for our new World Language Middle School project, and it also authorized renovations at our former Brookhaven facility that is now the home of international and global high schools. And so you really see that influence of that spend in FY21. And then as that spending started to taper off in 22, because we were essentially complete with our Operation Fix-It projects, that's when the ESSER money really started to come into play as well. So you'll see that purple bar for ESSER. And so you see the numbers start to swing back up for FY23. I'm expecting you'll continue to see that influence for FY24. And then you'll see that I put that PI bar at the very bottom in gold. And so the one thing I do really want to point out is that you see here we have never yet quite hit $60 million in annual spend, but $60 million is roughly the funds that we'll generate each year through this new permanent improvement levy. And so I do expect that it's going to take us a little bit of time to stabilize and get to that number, but we should land at roughly that $60 million spend and then stay there for the foreseeable future. And so I think that really bodes well in terms of our LEDE participation, because when we have stability, we can work with our vendors and they can generate stability too around being able to deliver projects for us and to be able to provide subcontractor workforce as well as material supplies. And so Brandy, if you'll then take us to that last slide. And so this is just kind of a cumulative. And again, this is just looking at 6 years of work, and there's no magic to why we picked 6 years. But I think pretty powerful to think that in 6 years we have, so again, this isn't contracting, this is spend. So these are payments out the door. We have spent $205 million. Of that, some just shy of $30 million has gone directly to LEDE vendors. So these are contractors hired directly by the district to perform work. Our LEDE subcontractors were receiving payments just over $30 million as well. So these would be secondary payments coming from our prime vendors to LEDE subcontractors. So that total LEDE spend across all categories is just below $60 million, so $59.9 million. And again, across all that spend, our history here is to be at about 29% participation. So we're thrilled that we're nearly 50% over the board's goal in terms of LEDE contracting and subcontracting. And I'll happily take any questions you might have.
You know, Alex, one of the things when you're looking at some of the percentages, there's an advantage to looking at the numbers on spend, because part of the challenge looking too early, if there are change orders to a contract where the prime's contract went up, the commitment stayed the same, that percentage actually of the spend dropped. So this is actually a more accurate way to see where dollars are really going, because they're the payments that are made instead of just the pledge that are made that get readjusted when contracts move in terms of change orders. So
Yeah, it's a
there's
great
a benefit
point.
to being a little behind because they're more accurate numbers.
Yep, it's a fantastic point. I don't know if we're going to get there. I do hope at some point we can automate some of the back end side of how we track. That would be an area of improvement for sure.
Has there been any discussion? I know we're seeing it some of the other public projects that we're working on, and not only looking at spend, but also looking at workforce, out of what you're doing. So it's not just about the folks who are making money, but it's the workforce that are kind of divided onto the projects, and providing some level of parity or support for firms who may be a majority-owned firm, but they really do a much better job in kind of diversifying their workforce. I'm just curious if that's been introduced or discussed anymore.
Jim, it is a great question.
Probably more for other people besides you, but.
Yes and no. I mean, so I'll give a little bit of feedback on the parts that I have been involved in with my team, because we're absolutely having those conversations. It's a big conversation that I think we'll need to have organizationally, and there's certainly lots of other organizations that are working in the same space too that I think we can partner with. But two things I can think of very quickly. So number one, we had an LEDE vendor fair on Monday with our partner Gordian. So you've seen the job order contracts that we're bringing through. And so I think there's a real unique opportunity there. So right now it's really on the subcontracting side. At some point when that contract goes back out for bid again, I think we'll have a different discussion about opportunities for our LEDEs to bid those projects as primes. But right now the real opportunity is on the subcontracting. And so I think we had a great event. It was at East High School. We had great participation. The feedback we got was really good, positive. So we're certainly going to look to bolster our LEDE numbers through our current job order contracting work. But like more direct to your question, Jim, so we've had a lot of discussions with our career tech team about how we get students involved. I'm certainly going to need some support from some of my colleagues to figure out how we can make that happen, but we're going to try to figure out if we can get some high school or maybe recently left high school, like graduated and moving on, see if we can figure out how to get some workforce from our system onto projects. And then we've also talked about how to potentially do some subcontractor mentoring, for lack of better words. So if we know we have scope that we know we're going to have to tackle year over year, and yet we don't seem to have LEDEs who are good fits for that labor component right now, can we bring them onto projects to do other scope that our vendors are more comfortable with, and sort of model, mentor, and help them learn some of those new skills? And so I don't have anything concrete to share with you on that one right now, but we have for sure had those conversations. And so we certainly expect, now that we have consistent funding that we can work with and we can long-range plan projects, I think it's an enormous opportunity for us.
Any other new business?
That's all I have for today.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. And with that, I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.